Well, good evening. Good evening. Thank you. So that reminds me the beginning of the semester when nobody wants to sit up front in the class, close to the professor. So speaking of professors, my name is Kostas Panos. I'm a professor of electrical engineering and computer sciences here at Berkeley. I've been here for some time, but they let me speak tonight because I'm also the director of CITRIS and the Banato Institute, which is the parent organization of the CITRIS Foundry, what we're celebrating tonight. Now, CITRIS is a large research institute. We are headquartered here at Berkeley in this beautiful building that we are in, but we also operate at UC Davis, Merced, and Santa Cruz. Our mission is to pursue information technology research in the interest of society, and we take this very seriously. This in the interest of society is very important to us. With more than 400 faculty from many disciplines, ranging from computer science, engineering, to social sciences, to political science, to physical sciences, mathematical sciences, and so on, economics. With all this brain power and the students and postdocs and researchers associated with that, we do information technology research on many areas, on sustainability, on health, on artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the applications as well as the societal implications of those technologies. Now, our positive impact to society comes through three main channels, as you will hear tonight. One is what you would expect: scholarly publications, inventions, and of course, training an army of new researchers that go to academia and industry and make a difference. The other one is that we study related policies, both locally and globally, and we educate the policymakers about the applications, again, the implications of those technologies. And finally, and quite naturally, and this is what we'll be hearing tonight, is through innovation, by starting companies and by sending ideas out to the world. So this leads us to this event, the celebration of the relaunching of the CITRIS Foundry that was created about 7 years ago. And tonight, we're here to celebrate its relaunching, but also to thank its original architects, Patrick Scaglia, somewhere in this room. Patrick. He was out there someplace. And of course, Peter Minor and Alec Chen, who actually ran the Foundry for all this time extremely successfully, and the many alumni that came from this operation. But today is about a new beginning, under a new leadership, and with a new vision. For that, I would like to introduce the CITRIS Foundry Director, Maher Hakim, to come to the stage.
I'm not sure if I should be speaking on this microphone or this microphone, but well, thank you all for coming. This is a great crowd. I'm excited about today's program. Let me start by thanking the team who put this event together today, the CITRIS team: Lori, Ravneet, Kozarov, Cap, Adriel, and the rest of the CITRIS crew. Thank you all. I see some of you here, but this has been a very good collaboration and an awesome event. I'm also very grateful to have my colleague, Kira Gardner, here with us. Where's Kira? Kira, come to the stage. So Kira just started with us 3 weeks ago. So her first mission was to actually help put this together. So thank you, Kira. I appreciate it. So we have an amazing turnout today, as you can see. Now, Kira and I would like to take credit for that, but we can't because we just started in our job. And I think this turnout is really a testament to two things: to the name and reputation that the CITRIS Foundry have built over the past 5 years. And because of that, I would like to acknowledge and honor the two founders that actually have been behind the CITRIS Foundry for the past 5 years. So Alec and Peter, if you're around, can you come to the stage, please? We're not going to forget Patrick. Where's Patrick? He's not still hiding somewhere. But Patrick was basically the brain behind the CITRIS Foundry. And then Alec and Peter, for the past 5 years, ran the program, to its success, and I'm going to share with you. Hey, here's Patrick. Here he is. He's just joined. You're not supposed to get these right now. Yes. Because what I want to do is I want to invite Julie to the stage to give them. Julie is the third. She's basically the partner in crime. So Julie joined the Foundry probably 3 years ago and helped Peter 3 years ago? More? Yes? And helped Peter and Alec build this amazing thing. And what happened is Peter and Alec are moving on to not better things, because the better things are here. And Julie is still with the CITRIS, but she's not with the Foundry. She's with the mother company, and she's helping with a lot of things that will support the Foundry. So Julie is going to present you with the momentums.
Wow.
Yes.
Alec actually, as one of his many talents, designed the original Foundry logo. So now you have a keepsake of it for your mantle for all time.
Thank you.
And before you leave, don't go on the stage yet. We've got another for you, so you want to come and see it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet, so I have no idea what's in it.
Yeah.
What if there's bad language? No? Okay.
Hey Alec, hey Peter.
What's up?
I think CITRIS Foundry really changed our lives at UMP for the better.
Alec and Peter helped us a lot when we were part of CITRIS Foundry and beyond. They helped us focus on certain parts of our business and technology and just narrow down and solve the issues that we were facing.
Yes, and supplied us with Domino's pizza. My favorite thing about working with Peter is that he is constantly encouraging us to expand our vision. He's always saying, don't be afraid to be audacious with regards to ways in which you think your innovation can change or shape the world.
If there was one impact that Alec really had on our team, it was to consistently remind us that for some reason our data-driven modeling requires data. And Peter, always a pleasure. Gonna get you some more Gary Snappy Dogs in your future. Come on down to Santa Cruz anytime.
I think the biggest impact that Alec and Peter had on me was really forcing me to rethink the definition of handsome.
I think as a technical founder, sometimes you want to claim that you can only solve the subset of problems that you feel like you have a handle on. And that's not what you should be doing. You should be imagining all the different problems that your technology can solve and how far you can really take it. So thanks for getting us to dream big.
So on behalf of the Foundry, on behalf of CITRIS, on behalf of UC Berkeley, and on behalf of UC University of California, I thank you both for everything you've done over the past 5 years. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So before we have the panel discussion, which I'm very excited about, what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes with you to basically share with you what the CITRIS Foundry is all about, its history and its accomplishment to date, and where we're going and our vision and plans for the future. So it's only going to take about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we will have the exciting speakers come and join me on the stage for the panel discussion. So the CITRIS Foundry is, our mission is to accelerate deep tech innovation within the University of California. And our mission actually spans 5 university campuses: UC Berkeley, Davis, Merced, Santa Cruz, and UCSF. And the Foundry was launched in 2003, like Kostas had mentioned. And we have it hosted in the UC campus, although we serve all these 5 communities. And we focus on accelerating deep tech innovations. Now, why UC Berkeley? UC Berkeley is almost like a hub of science and research, but also a hub of entrepreneurship. And when you put the two things together, you get amazing innovation. So 38,000 students, about 1,500 faculty, give and take. UC Berkeley is a leader in gene therapy, machine learning, robotics, AI, materials, and sensors, all of the new technologies that are cutting-edge technologies that enable our future for tomorrow. But it's also an entrepreneurial engine. So about 500 VC-backed startups that have raised over $4 billion of funding, and they've seen exit of over $25 billion over the past 20 years or so. So when you put these two things together, when you put science and research with an entrepreneurial spirit and a hustler attitude, you get amazing results that contribute to the purpose we have at CITRIS, which is the benefit of society. CITRIS Foundry to date, since its founding in the past 6 years, have graduated about 50 companies, startups. We have two companies short of that 50 number. These startups have moved on to raise about $100 million of financing with a 79% success rate in following up investments. So it's a very good accomplishment in terms of the rates by which we measure the success of the program itself. We also have very diverse group of people, applicants in our community. So 37% of all the founders in the companies are women. Very high numbers of faculty members participating as founders, and 79% graduate students. So that actually is easy to understand given our focus on research and science technology going to market. And our focus on deep tech means that we are involved in themes that require heavy science and technology. So everything from health and biotech to semiconductors to agriculture technology to sensors to robotics to AI. This is really the composition of all the startups that have graduated from the Foundry to date. So if you think about the past 5 years, it's all have been about accelerating startups that come with heavy science and deep tech backgrounds, particularly within the graduate students environment, but also with heavy participation from faculty. Now that we've successfully traversed that path, if you understand, if you've been part of the UC Berkeley ecosystem, you know that over the past several years have also been a lot of programs, the Skydeck is one of them and others, who have also successfully participating in building the ecosystem. We also live in an environment where there are a tremendous amount of private sector entities that are doing acceleration, incubation, seed investments, and venture capital. So as we move forward with the Foundry, our mission, and to be in alignment with the mission of CITRIS about the benefit of society, what we feel is that the next stage of the Foundry, we want to actually support more teams and more projects to actually see innovation and impact in society. So if you remember the slide before, what I've shown here is very high success in follow-up financing. But that comes at a cost. And the cost is that our acceptance rate is at about 10%, meaning that we only accepted 10% of all the teams that wanted to become part of the Foundry. And a lot of these teams wanted to take their innovation to impact, but are not necessarily appropriate to become a VC fundable company, because the impact of innovation and research may not always be aligned with creating wealth and economic impact for investors. It may have social impact. It may end up becoming a small business. And both of these two opportunities don't lead themselves to venture capital backing. Because of that, Foundry 2.0, we're repositioning it as the Innovation Hub for the University of California. And what we mean by that is two things. On the one hand, we want to support more and more teams from University of California campuses reach impact based on their science and technology, which means we're going beyond just an acceleration of a startup. We want to help teams and projects potentially be able to transfer their technology to the private sector. We want to help teams and projects potentially create social impact out of their technologies, which means that they're going through the path of grants and social programs. We want to enable teams and projects to become small businesses that use the technology and the science that developed into consulting services and impact at the local basis. So not every technology and science, and not every founder, and not every potential innovator wants to actually build a billion-dollar company. A lot of them want to see an impact in different ways. And because of that, the CITRIS Foundry 2.0 is going to open its doors to a lot of teams who actually want to pursue different paths for innovation. The other thing we want to do, so that's one dimension. The other thing we want to do with the CITRIS Foundry is that we know something about innovation and we want to educate the world about it. So we want to open our doors and create more programs to help teach innovation to a broader group of people. And that includes industry, that includes international partners and international team. So the CITRIS Foundry as an innovation hub is going to support more teams to capitalize on the opportunity and realize their innovations. And we want to expand our base to actually teach innovation and innovation processes to more group of people. So that's why we have these three different circles. We are an innovation incubator. We're going to open door for visiting innovators. So this is something similar to visiting scholars, but people who want to come and be part of a UC Berkeley campus, but they want to do innovation, not research. And then we're going to start what we call deep tech boot camps that are week-long innovation boot camps to teach people how to take deep technologies into impact. But what I'm here today is to announce the opening of the Foundry Incubator. And that's the first program. And the incubator is built on the accelerator program that we've had over the past 5 years. And we say the incubator is about 3 different potential paths with 3 different skills for the teams. So any science or technology to see impact will go through 1 of 3 different paths. You either become a startup, which is the standard typical path, or a small business, which it's a for-profit organization, or you become a social enterprise, a nonprofit, or you transfer your technology into a larger organization, an industry partner who can leverage it. And I use the term tech transformation, not tech transfer, because I don't think technology transfer is an event. It's not a transaction. It's actually an engagement. So what we want to do is we want to help founders of teams of people, innovators, find a potential partner through a collaborative agreement, a collaborative process between the science and research team and the potential industry partner. Technology transfer could happen by licensing, but could happen also by knowledge transfer of the team themselves. So it will be a good path for the postdocs, the PhD students, to find a home in a company that will hire the entire team to pursue that technology into the new company. So we see 3 paths to innovation, and each one of them deserve attention from us at the Foundry to support and help and nurture. And the way we do that is regardless of what you want to do, regardless of which path you want to pursue, you still need to learn 3 things. You need to learn how to take that science and technology into a product. So the process of product development, technology fusion, if you will, to create something that finds value is an important thing to learn. The second thing you need to learn is the innovation process, which is how to make this product useful for somebody, how to actually understand who wants this product, who can make use of it, which segment I can go after. And the third and most important thing you need to learn is how to build an organization to help you make that product a reality. So the innovator mindset is all about the ability to create teams and lead teams of people who can help you with the innovation process. So I always say it's very difficult to actually lead a team of people. It's very difficult. The hardest thing to do is actually manage and lead people. But within the context of innovation, it's extremely difficult for 2 reasons. One is that there's an enormous amount of uncertainty. So you're operating in an unstructured environment that makes things very difficult. And second, there's an enormous amount of pressure. So the uncertainty and pressure creates a higher demand on the leader of the team to have the ability and the skills that allow him or her to succeed in innovation. And that's not an easy thing to do. So these are the three things that we actually will be teaching and helping and mentoring and coaching the teams that join our Foundry Incubator. So we've got the expertise, both in-house and also through our mentors network to help the teams in the incubator. We've got the space and the labs that are available to us as resources to also help the team. And we've got access to a whole bunch of partners that offer services that can help the team into their journey. And all of these things we're bringing to bear for teams of faculty members, PhD students, and postdocs that are associated with UC Berkeley and the 4 University of California campuses. So if you know anyone, if you're interested and you know anyone who may be interested in our service, our application will open in June 1st in a couple of days, and you're invited to all join us. So with that, I think I will invite the panelists to join us on the stage to talk about the discussion around what we talked about. What I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce them one by one, and I'm going to use sort of the least difficult last names first so that I can get confident as I invite people. So I'm going to start with Christine Tsai, who is the CEO and founder of 500 Startup. And Danielle D'Agostaro, who is the managing director at Alchemist Accelerator and the chief operating officer. Thank you. Both of them, by the way, are Berkeley alumni. So, yes. Boy, that's a tough one. Brian Bartholomew. Okay. Brian. Brian runs a innovation center at, I think this one, yes, at Stanford University that does something very similar to the CITRIS Foundry, but they focus on energy incubation. So welcome, thank you all for joining, and I'm going to go and sit on my chair and we start the discussion. Okay, so why I'm getting old. you know you're getting old when you start making noises every time you sit down and stand up. So there are 3 themes I'm hoping to cover in this conversation. Theme number 1, which is what I discussed here, which is all around the commercialization of research and science. So how do we take research and science technology from research labs that have been funded very well by government and sponsors and grants into impact? And the second theme is related to the idea of deep tech. You know, deep tech right now, there's a lot of interest within the investment community. So I think there's an intersection between the interest in deep tech and all the commercialization of science from research and lab. And the third one, I think, which is also very important, is how do we, as innovation hubs within university, collaborate better with you, private sector accelerators, incubators, seed funds, to help accelerate more and bring the bridge to take more and more of science and technology to market. So what I'd like to do is maybe I'll start by asking each of you to describe your organization and what you do. And maybe as you do through this description, give us example of things you've done in the past or recently that are along these 3 themes. So maybe I'll start with you, Danielle. Put you on the spot.
So as Maher said, I'm the managing partner and CEO at Alchemist. We take early stage companies that work with, that sell into businesses, and we put them through a 6-month program and teach them how to sell and fundraise. And a lot of the companies that we put through the program are exactly as you described. They are very technical. A lot of them are building game-changing tech, and those are the companies that we actually like to work with because those have the greatest, could have the greatest impact on the current processes, right? We're not trying to find companies that are doing things, 5x better. We want 10x better, 100x better. Some things that is completely game changing. And we want, we like taking the risks on companies in the early stages, in that we, sometimes, this could go really well or this could fail really quickly. But we'd prefer to be a part of that journey and guide them in that process.
Do you have PhD students, faculty members that have recently joined your?
Yeah, recently we're taking in 3 batches a year, so we're doing about 75 companies a year right now. And the companies that we're looking for are, all about the teams. And by teams, I mean what, their expertise, where they went to school, who they worked for, what are they building, so all of those things. And so, but we do have faculty from all the major universities here and around the world. We're looking for that. We're also looking for, people that have been in industry for a while. We had, some people like he was the former editor-in-chief at TechCrunch. He went through. We have Stanford faculty from the Slack Accelerator, Stanford, Skydeck, but all over. But that's what we're looking for. We're putting a lot of emphasis on the teams and the technology and really helping to develop that.
Christine?
Great. Well, it's nice to be back at my old stomping grounds. It's always good to be back. This building was not here when I was here. So.
What year was that? When did you graduate?
I graduated 2002.
Okay.
So soda, I do remember soda. I have some bad memories of soda. I'm Christine Tsai. I'm CEO and co-founder at 500 Startups. A little bit about 500. So 500 is a global venture capital firm, and we have been around for 9 years now. And as of to date, our portfolio spans 2,200 companies, representing about 74 countries around the world. The portfolio itself is just about 50%. I would like to round up, but technically 49 point something, but just close to half outside of the US. And that's always been our mission from the very beginning. And in fact, how Maher and I know each other a lot through our international funds and investments in markets like Latin America, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, North Africa region, East Asia, and of course, Silicon Valley and the domestic US. In terms of how we invest, we're typically investing probably maybe similar stage, or maybe we are kind of downstream to Alchemist, but we are very much early stage. However you call it, the terminology has changed quite a bit in Silicon Valley. For those of you who are familiar, from seed stage, which is now kind of maybe considered Series A, there's pre-seed, and I don't know what else they'll coin going forward, but generally we're usually one of the first, or if not the first, check before an institutional round. And so for us, when we're investing in companies, they have product, they do have a product and a company. They may or may not have their first non-founder hires. They do have traction. There's actually varying amounts of traction in the companies that we invest in, because we're actually pretty sector agnostic. Deep tech and kind of more of the hard tech companies has been actually a bit more recent for us, maybe in the last couple of years that we've been investing. A lot of our bread and butter is SaaS, consumer, and marketplaces, so things that generally have a clear revenue model. That's typically what we've enjoyed investing in and have done well with. So within our portfolio, we've invested in companies like Twilio, SendGrid, Canva, Credit Karma, and a few international companies, Grab, Bukalapak, and others. And TalkDesk is actually an accelerator company of ours. And so when it comes to, I guess, the deep tech companies, for us it's actually been quite interesting, because what we have found is they're not necessarily only concentrated in Silicon Valley or in the Bay Area or in the US. There's actually a number of these innovative technologies happening all around the world. It wasn't really like that with a lot of our investments early on. Or actually, for us, we have been investing internationally for a long time, but a lot of the attention from co-investors and in the industry was very much Silicon Valley only. So when we started investing in MENA, there was a lot of questions on, what kind of deal flow is there? Is that a sustainable ecosystem? And now in 2019, it's a very different story. We're seeing, let's say, companies like Kareem getting acquired, and with deep tech, it's actually in many ways interesting that it's maybe one of the, if you call it a sector, that's really kind of globalized, and that we see a lot of this innovation in companies in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, of course, in Latin America. So it's really almost like geo-agnostic in many ways.
Thank you. Brian, you come from the other side of the fence.
Yes, I do.
Academia.
So I'm at a center that was founded with a gift from Tom Steyer and Kat Taylor, hence the name Tomkat, in case you were wondering. And what we do is we focus on sustainable energy, but also its intersection with transportation, food, water, health, and the environment. So it's kind of sustainability, really. And our mission, one of our major objectives, is to help externalize inventions and innovations that originate in the university. And these could be things that come out of research. Often they're tangentially related to the primary research that people do. There could be stuff that comes out of classes or things that people come up with by themselves as well. We cater to faculty, staff, graduate students, postdocs, and undergraduates. And 65% of the people who go through our program are from the School of Engineering, 22% from the business school, and then the others from humanities and sciences, earth sciences, and the medical school. Nobody from law yet. So what we do is we sort of assist all the other entrepreneurship resources on campus. We work in conjunction with them to externalize and to help folks kind of get out of the university and head over to these external resources that are available to them. And internally, what we might do is, I would classify it as a sort of customized concierge service. We sort of customize our program for each group that approaches us. Everyone has slightly different needs and requirements, particularly on the deep and hard science side. And so what we tend to do is work with people and tell them, oh, you need to take such and such a class, or do this, or do that, or get into this program internally. And then when they get to the point where they're ready to go outside, we kind of help direct them as well. So we sort of have a sort of a unique role. And typically the duration that people are with us could be anywhere from 3 months to 12 months. So it's at the point where they're ready to get their project out of the university. What we provide them are a couple of things. We give them equity-free funding, and the money is used for building prototypes, doing customer trials, market validation, getting their story straight, maybe getting a team together, really getting them to the point where they can go and raise more money or do whatever they do. Since we don't take equity, we don't really care how they externalize what they do. It could be, for example, working with the California wastewater treatment plants to get some new energy efficient water treatment technology scaled up and implemented and integrated into existing operations. It could be a new battery company. It could be working with something like Off-Grid Electric in Africa to deploy some module that maybe hangs off of their solar systems. So we have a multiplicity of projects that we accept. Philosophically, very much aligned with the vision that Maher painted of CITRIS 2.0.
I took notes when I spoke with you on the phone.
So if I think about what is it that we really do, I think there's two things. The first one is we kind of start to expose people within the university to the fairly formidable challenge of turning a technology or a technology demonstration into a product. Almost without exception, people underestimate the resources and time that is required. It typically takes twice as long and costs 3 times as much as people think it will. That's one thing that we try to do. We don't walk them through this process, but we have a team of mentors and advisors who have brought multiple products to market. It's a very tough undertaking. The beauty is it's not rocket science. There's a gazillion people who have done it, and so we walk them through that process. We do project reviews for people like they would do in a company or in industry. That's one of the things we do. So this introducing them to the whole lot of other stuff you have to do after you get all your presentation together and your product market fit and your customers and this, that, and the other, customer discovery, there's this little nitty-gritty thing of actually turning this into a product. The second thing we do, which is sort of related to that, is timeline compression. I worked in startups for 15 years, and I know that your biggest enemy is time. You need to find ways to work in parallel, to be resourceful, to do sort of asymmetrical thinking and actually get your product to market really quick. Those, I think, in essence, are the two things that we do, and we depend a lot, like I think you do here, on the community and people on the outside. So that's kind of what we do.
How many projects have you supported over the past?
So
do you have any numbers?
we've been around for 6 years. We've supported 62 projects. We've given them about $4.1 million in funding. So you do the math, it's like 60K something each. Some, if they're doing a software-related thing, they may need $15,000. We use our external reviewers to review these proposals. And if they have nonsense in terms of how much they're asking for, they'll tell them, no, you don't need that much money, or you're asking for some ridiculously small money, you're going to need much more. So it's very flexible and fluctuates. And they've raised quite a bit of follow-on funding, about $200 million, of which $15 million is state and government and other types of grants. And one of the things we do is we don't really care if they don't have $1 billion market. Some of our very successful companies that have come out of tech have actually turned into very lucrative and very stable consulting company type things. So we're perfectly okay with doing that, or social innovation. And some of them have been, venture. A lot of them have been venture backed. Our most successful company were 3 20-year-olds who took a leave of absence and sold their company in 7 months to SunPower. So they actually did solar, which nobody really was doing. And
if I were to ask you, out of the 60-some companies you supported, I know you mentioned the underestimation of the time and effort that takes to build a product. So in addition to that as the number one challenge, what are the other two? What would you call the two other biggest challenges that teams face in that journey from lab to impact?
I think one of the key ones is team formation. And this is a really tough, we don't get involved because this is kind of like a marriage, and you don't want to have people come back to you and say, you hooked me up with this person and it's not working out. But I think that's one of the toughest things, and I don't quite know how to solve that problem. We try to get them to participate in these project-based classes on campus where they can meet people and kind of try before they buy. The other thing I do is I recommend that they participate in business plan competitions. And this way they can work with people and see how hard they work and what contributions they make before they actually bring them on board. And it's the usual thing. You have the techies who sometimes start a company and the MBAs come and say, well, this is lovely. I want to join in and I'll be the CEO. And they're like, no, we want to be the CEO. And I talk to these, this is always sort of a recurring battle that we have with the students. And I tell them, make a decision in terms of your team, or those decisions will be made for you. I mean, when people give you $5 and $10 and $20 million, they'll only do so if they feel they're comfortable that you're capable of kind of spending this thing judiciously and you know what you're doing. And if not, they'll replace you. You don't really have a choice. I've been in situations, I've lived through this, where somebody invests in your company, they tell you how great you are, and then a year later they say, oh, by the way, you're going to be something else. Here we got this new CEO that's going to run the show.
Christine, you guys have invested in what, 1,500 more companies now?
2,200.
You're 2,200. Wow, it's like every day there's another one that gets out. So you have enough data probably to tell you, okay, so for technology-based companies that are dependent on tech or science, what are the top 3 challenges for success?
I think actually it's not too different from a lot of other sectors in terms of what are the challenges in building a company. There's probably things that are maybe more unique to the harder tech companies, especially if they're coming from more academic backgrounds or research backgrounds. But I mean, the way I think we think about it as a lot of what venture invested in over the past, decade and 20 years. A lot of it was really this. I don't know if the audience you're familiar with. I don't know who came up with this categorization, but kind of this concept of these different industrial revolutions. So the first around kind of water and steam to mechanized production, the second wave around electricity to more around like mass production. The third, which is kind of what I think we went through in the last couple decades, was kind of more around the information and kind of around like automating a lot of things. And I guess this fourth industrial revolution, which is where you see a lot of even kind of previously tech investors starting to take an interest in technologies that they probably don't have too much domain expertise in, is this idea of now that the information accessibility is so broad and anyone can access almost any kind of information, and sometimes even in a scary way, you see a lot of this overlap with sectors that historically seemed out of reach or just not accessible in some ways. So that's why you see, I think in your programs, a lot of like biotech, space, aerospace, agritech, like whatever kind of a lot of what you consider as like very hard tech innovation. You see that crossover with software, other kind of accessible like stacks, both either on the enterprise side and the consumer side. So it's actually quite fascinating in terms of like what are the factors in which those types of companies will be more successful or not. I think there is some of that aspect of can they turn this into something what kind of pain point is this solving? So I'm sure, I certainly don't come from a research background or anything like that, but my sense is that from a lot of the founders we've interacted with, there are certain technologies that are fascinating. What's the practical application for them, I think, is still TBD. So there's a lot of this interesting technology that is looking for a customer or pain point. And so understanding what that is sometimes a challenge, but actually we see this a lot with people building an app, and it's something that's not quite as complex, but definitely maybe more so in this space, just because there's so much time invested into developing these innovative technologies that to then spend the time to try to find a customer when there maybe isn't a clear customer yet, or maybe it's part of something else, is something I think is maybe unique to the deep tech space. That, and then I think the other points around the team. I'm sure there's certainly teams where it's two very technical scientific founders, and they're able to have that business mindset and commercialize it. In some cases, it might mean bringing in kind of the hustler business person, but that is again same thing with a lot of the startups that we've worked with over the past 9 years. You can have the two technical founders that don't really know exactly how to sell their product. Sometimes they address that weakness by bringing in a strong sales team or maybe a kind of business-minded co-founder. Sometimes they don't. There's always the personality conflicts on who kind of is running the company or whatnot. But I would think that aside from kind of the aspect around like what's the actual addressable market and the customer, they're not too different, I think, from just fundamentally starting a company, which is very hard, and getting it to a point that it's maybe fundable, and then to the point where it's like as it kind of traverses the growth.
And you guys build your reputation on supporting tech founders.
Yes.
So you love tech founders.
Yeah.
You work with them. So and you work with them by setting specific goals and objectives and basically whipping them into making these goals and objectives.
Not literally, but yes.
So what are the top challenges you see?
To Christine's point, it is kind of the same. So when we're taking them into the accelerator, they've already kind of convinced us that we believe they're the right team, they have the right expertise. They may have talked to a couple people to see if there's any sort of validation for the tech. It's kind of the same thing that by the time they get to us, we're not at the ideation forming, right? We're not at the tech forming kind of stages. They, at that point, have made a decision that, okay, yes, I think there's something here that I want to try to commercialize. They just don't know how to do it, right? And oftentimes, you know, it's again to the team, right? You need to have the mentality. If without that, you honestly don't have anything. And if you don't have a team, you're not going to hire other people. You're not going to get investment. No one's going to buy from you. You know, so it all starts with the right mentality for the people that are building it. Whether that's 1 to 3, you know, I know there's a lot of, and we've had this conversation too over the years about, you know, finding people against a technology, and honestly, not sure if that really works. You know, the tech needs people who, it's not just about the tech. You can actually have a really bad technology and still be able to sell it, you know, which has been proven in the Valley, you know. So it's honestly all about the right people. Founder market fit, right? It's all about the right people bringing it forward and understanding their strengths and weaknesses, right? So, and we do take a lot of technical founders. They've never sold before, they never fundraised, you know, so we're teaching a lot of these skills, which is common to all companies, deep tech or not. And the fun part is actually watching them kind of metamorphosize into these beautiful butterflies by the end, where they actually believe that they can do this, right? And hire other people, convincing other people that they can build this, they can take this to the next level. And so, you know, I think with any technical founder, the challenge is getting them to think beyond the tech, right? They love the tech, they could build it all day long, but communicating the value, what it provides in order to sell it, customer, investor, other members of the team, right? That is the hard part, right? And getting them outside of just the things that they know and love. And so, you know, we're helping them. Yeah, we're educating them in those ways.
So you both mentioned that one of the acceptance criteria for companies in your program is traction. Traction means you already have some sort of a product you put on the market and some sort of a validation.
We actually don't.
You don't have traction?
We don't need them to. We will take a bet purely on the team and the market opportunity. I mean, of course, it's nice if they do have some traction. It helps us make a better decision. But
they have to have a product.
They not necessarily.
Okay.
We've taken teams with an idea, and some sort of customer validation, meaning they've talked, or even from personal experience. We have faith that they understand the problem because they've experienced it, and you know, we're also putting faith that they can actually execute.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so in general, you have this chicken and the egg. So for deep tech, it's, you know, to be able to go raise money from a VC, you need to have built a product and have some sort of validation. But to build a product, you need money. And this is not something that is usually funded by a research grant, because you're now out of the research arena into more of a product development. And the product development in deep tech requires funding. And if you are Stanford, you have the ability to actually give them grants. But if you are one of the hundreds of other universities that are around the country, that are public universities, where you can't afford to have grants. So there's that. So how do we get the venture community to become, or do we? Or is that the right answer? Is that the right solution? Is that who's going to fund the long and costly process of putting hard tech first product out in the market if it's not a research grant and it's not investors? What are you doing like in Singapore, for example? I know you guys have an interest in deep tech in Singaporean companies, but do you wait, because the government of Singapore had managed to make investments in getting them to product, and therefore it opens the door for investors to come in?
Well, I guess going back to the original question that you mentioned in terms of a lot of VCs expect some level of traction. So it's a common response. Come back when you have more traction. It's a little early. That's also code for, not that into you sometimes. But I think that the mindset on what defines traction for these types of companies is certainly something that a lot of investors need to understand, and I think a lot of them do. So, for example, when I'm evaluating a company that's an e-commerce company, certainly I'm going to expect like real traction, because it's very easy to get off the ground without any funding, completely bootstrapped, and build a business. We have a number of companies that have built very successful brands and have close to, like, say, $1 million in revenue a year, all without having taken any outside capital. So the bar is higher there in terms of what traction would be for us to invest. Now, when it comes to other industries, fintech is one example where that traction that we would apply to, the traction standards we would apply for, say, an e-commerce company or maybe even a SaaS company, we're not necessarily going to have those types of revenue expectations or customer expectations for a fintech company that still is kind of going through, I don't know, there's a lot of more regulatory challenges that they have to, hurdles that they have to pass, or same for digital health companies where just the traction, what you consider traction is going to be different. Interestingly, we've been doing like a handful of blockchain investments, and I'm not the blockchain expert on the team, but for a lot of them, if they have a prototype, that's considered actually like significant traction. And then so when it comes to the deep tech companies, for us, I don't think we have invested in companies that are just idea stage yet. In the cases where we have done that in the past, it's typically been a proven entrepreneur or someone we've backed before. But I do think that for a lot of venture investors, they would have to get comfortable with the fact that if you want to fund deep tech companies at the early stages, they're not going to have $1 million in sales. They're not going to, be in every, say it's a biotech company, like, they're not going to be having these $20 million contracts. It's just, if they are at that point, they don't need you. And so we typically, like with a lot of the deep tech investments we've done, they're usually, I guess traction could be considered anything from they have a prototype, they might be running trials. Even if they're at the point where they're running trials, that's actually pretty good, I mean, in some cases. So it's really a moonshot bet. And I think the challenge in some cases is that a lot of these venture investors, like, how do you diligence a company in aerospace or biotech when you know nothing about that space? I guarantee there are investors that probably back it because it's cool. They don't really know what exactly the technology is, but when we say our Southeast Asia team that has actually been doing a lot more deep tech investments, they have kind of their own diligencing process, because certainly they don't come from academia, but they have kind of their own network that helps them evaluate some of the technology behind companies. They can say this technology is actually pretty solid, or give their domain expertise take, and then the GPs are able to just speak with the founders and kind of understand if they at least have something there in terms of understanding how to turn this into a business, and then they take that early bet. Now, in terms of like, does that seem risky or not? It's probably very unique to different firms. For us, because we are early stage investors and we've invested in thousands of companies, that's kind of part of our model, that we do have a lot of swings at the baseball. We do take a lot of swings. So if these companies, our expectation is that most of these companies will fail at the early stage, whether it's deep tech, whether it's a SaaS company, whether it's ed tech. But for deep tech especially, it's kind of a new. There's definitely a lot more interest, I think, because a lot of VCs are now looking for the next big thing. And if you think back 20 years ago, or however long, it was probably the same when the internet was becoming something that was of interest, or mobile. And so on. Yeah.
So let me jump on the final topic, which is collaboration between innovation centers, hubs, and universities.
Could I make one comment about funding some of these deep tech companies? I think to get them started and to get to the point where they can gain traction with some of the conventional investors, there are three options that kind of exist. These are not widespread, but they do exist. One is government grants, STTR and SBIR. Those tend to be very good, and many of our teams who can't quite get to the point where they attract VC money, if they get an SBIR grant, 150K, and they make some progress, then they attract more money. The second thing, 6 of our teams are here at LBL or have gone through the cyclotron road program. And those programs at the government labs are just fabulous. Many of the companies that have gone there, if they didn't have those labs as an option, wouldn't exist today. The third thing is corporate and strategic investors. I mean, they may be people who would partner with you, but you have to change your expectations and your pitching. They're not going to value your company at $1 billion. They bring in some financial types who do all sorts of calculations and say, no, you're a $20 million company. Or they strike a very hard bargain, and the agreements you have with them make it complicated to get VC funding in the future. So there are some options that exist and can be used and leveraged. And I've seen examples of all of these.
So thank you, Brian. So the one thing I want to just throw out before we'll open the discussion to questions from the audience, is that the only thing I know in terms of partnership between incubation, innovation hubs within universities and private sector investors is this whole idea of a demo day, right? So we support some companies, and then we invite the investors, and here are all the companies. You know, it's like I come from the Middle East. It's like, here's my daughter, show it out off, you know. So is there a different model? Have you experimented with different, more tighter partnership, so that I know, for example, a company that we're supporting could be a great lead for 500 because 500 has XYZ ability to take them to the next step. And therefore, the traction that they will require will be different because they know that it's coming out of the foundry. You know, so are there opportunities to do something like that where there is more of a, we will raise the company to be ready for you, but then in return, don't expect the same traction you would expect from somebody who's knocking on your door?
I mean, I think typically when we look at companies, and I'll focus specifically on the accelerator program that we run in San Francisco, a lot of the way that we source companies is there's a variety of different channels. So like many other accelerator programs, there is an open application process which brings in some amount of deal flow. But we do rely heavily on our network, which is quite global. So our own portfolio founders are always a great source of other founders because they will talk about their experience, and it's a very wide network. So that brings in a lot of companies. When it comes to other accelerator programs that might have companies that are then ready to go to undergrad to graduate school, and 500 is maybe considered a graduate school for the other accelerators. We have actually done that here and there over the years. There have been a couple instances where it was sort of formal, and by formal in air quotes, it's more that we had sort of a handshake agreement where we might say, have a couple spots open for what this program considers like the shining stars, the best companies from their particular cohort, and might do some sort of a modified investment deal. That was complementary to whatever equity was being taken to the previous program. So we have done those things in the past. It's been actually a long time since we did that, but we had done that with a great program in Europe called Seed Camp, where we did this for a few cohorts, where there was kind of a partnership that they would send us kind of what they thought were we would let them pick, but they would send like one or two companies that they thought were the best companies, or were wanting to come to Silicon Valley. We would also invest in them, and it was kind of a nice way to diversify the batch. And I could see that being an interesting idea for say, the Foundry program, working with other accelerators. And there's certainly kind of a lot of the educational aspect during the course of the batches, where people might come in for mentoring or office hours for the companies and getting access to investors. There's a lot of creative, I think, ideas you can do on top of the general come to demo day.
Yeah. For Alchemist, we have something similar. I mean, of course, we rely heavily on the referrals that we get from our network, but one of them is our channel partners around the world. And these are other organizations like the Foundry that are incubating companies. But it's not that we carve out spots, it's more that we fast track some for interviews, which we already have a 5 to 6% acceptance rate. So the classes are small, every seat counts. So we can't guarantee a spot, but just to get an interview in front of our panel is huge for a lot of companies. And honestly, I don't really think it benefits the companies any if they just to get a spot into an accelerator without having to work for it a little bit. The beauty about going through an interview process is you get grilled a little bit. You have to have answers to questions that investors are going to care about, and that's setting them up for success in the right ways. Even if they don't get into the accelerator, it should be a beneficial learning experience regardless. But that's one way of doing diligence for us. And so if they get past the panel, and the panel extends them an offer, then there's got to be something there, because our panel is full of people that have built successful businesses, valued at $100 million or more, right? Or have raised at least $500K from some of our alums, right? People that have done it, and they're, if they're evaluating them and say, okay, we think this company has something, then we'll give them a shot, right? But we do have these referral type programs, and working with something like the Foundry would be great, and it definitely adds to the diversity of the classes is which we're aiming for.
And Brian, do you work with a smaller group of VCs that are more intimate partnership potential with Stanford?
We don't really get too much involved in that. We have a peculiar kind of schizophrenic attitude at Stanford where we can't be seen to be overtly incubating companies. So we talk about it as determining the commercialization potential of technology, and we have to kind of be a little careful in that respect. We do have a kind of university-affiliated accelerator. It's not really an accelerator. They call it a startup community, founders community called StartX. Mm-hmm. So about 30% of our teams go through that. And I think some of our teams have gone through your programs as well. I see tremendous value in resources like yours, because there's two things that they offer. Starting a company is such a lonely job and a tough job. You are in a community of other founders, which is huge. You can talk to people, they give you references, and you're among your peers. And the second thing, I think, to the point that Christine touched upon, the success of Silicon Valley has come in waves, and there is a tremendous, reserve of accumulated knowledge and wisdom, the tribal lore, if you will. And a lot of that resides in incubators and accelerators. It doesn't kind of just exist there. So, I think these are all the kinds of things that we do. We have events. Maher, you've been to one where we try to bring a community together, and there are a number of investors who attend these and talk to our students, but we don't really get too involved. We may provide introductions, but we don't get too involved in the funding aspect of it. But it's absolutely critical, though.
Very good. Thank you. Well, we'll take a few questions from the audience. We got a mic.
I'm bringing a mic to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. My question is about the new interest or renewed interest about deep tech.
Yeah.
So what were you doing before that? And why the interest in deep tech now?
What does deep tech mean to you? Why deep tech all of a sudden is the buzzword in the investment community? What's the difference between deep tech and what happened before deep tech?
Just tech.
What was it? Was it very shallow? I guess.
Dating apps. Yes, we went through that phase.
Uber for X.
Yeah, Uber for X.
I have a definition.
Yes, very good.
Your minimum viable product is your final viable product.
Okay.
There's no shortcuts.
Yes. There are no shortcuts.
Huh. Yeah.
Christine, you're.
No, I just this banter made me think of marketing in Silicon Valley was probably seen as it's marketing, but nowadays it's called growth, and suddenly it's cool.
Yeah.
So like growth hacking, and if you've heard that term, but it's just, growth hacking is in many ways marketing in sales, so it's just a nicer term. I think for us, what we've invested in has evolved a lot over the past, over time, because we want to stay relevant with what companies are building. So I'm sure this is the case for all of us. In the beginning, we were very much software. We weren't married to it, but we kind of had this thought that we're not going to really do hardware because we don't understand hardware. Although, ironically, one of our biggest exits in the portfolio was a hardware company. So it's hard to explain. It was a 3D printer, a company called MakerBot. But so we kind of say, well, except for them, but we generally don't do hardware. But what we've seen in the market is that even for hardware companies, there are starting to increasingly be and already are like very clear software aspects to hardware companies. So maybe hardware is the entry point for getting access to consumers, but then from there, there's software that retains those customers. So you see this with certainly things like Nest, like a lot of hardware products where you buy it and then you have an app on your phone and you subscribe a monthly fee for it to work or for it to be useful, so that you don't just forget about this device and it goes nowhere. So because of that crossover, whether it's cheaper to build hardware nowadays than it was 10 years ago, possibly. I mean, it's same with software. It's much easier to build an app than it was, in the early 2000s, where you probably raised a Series A of a couple million and that just paid your server costs. Now it's much cheaper. So because of the changes in just things like that, it's probably made industries that we wouldn't have historically looked at, like hardware or trying to think other things. That's actually a good example, but the same is happening for deep tech, where probably we would have seen those as maybe invested in by venture investors, but maybe more in like the med tech, kind of a little bit different from kind of the Silicon Valley tech community. So that, plus maybe there's just some fatigue on a lot of the ideas that have been out there, which are very much kind of like variations of what's already out there. We were just saying like, Uber for dog walking. Well, there is that, I mean. But wanting to really crave something that's just really like, what are the big moonshot ideas? Like what's really innovative? So I think that has been a transition, in venture for the past, however many cycles, like probably even from like the .com era, like people were building all these fascinating things on the internet, and then that transitioned into, other things. So it's possible that it's nothing that's really new. It's not like all of a sudden there's all these aerospace companies or biotech companies. Those were always there, but those starting to have some crossover with either software or information. Maybe that's the part that's the turning into what we call deep tech or frontier tech. I don't know whichever is cooler.
Yeah.
You referred to old days, it's the early 2000s. My first company was in 1996. What does that make me? Prehistoric?
Dinosaur.
Dinosaur? What is deep tech to you?
Deep tech, it's the game-changing technology. That's how we think about it. We've invested in a printer for DNA. Like we've invested in Rigetti quantum computing, which just raised 120 million. They don't actually have a commercialized product right now, but they have a lot of smart people on their team, and they're probably going to build the first supercomputer, right? So we have things like that. We also have one of the first drone companies called Matternet. They're doing the last mile kind of development, and they helped with a lot of the drone policy, and figuring that out. So deep tech for us is literally like that 100x kind of change that we're looking for. They are going to change the way we do X completely, right? And I think that's that automation that Christine was talking about. Right? Like it's not automation just blanket, but it's that next phase of everything we thought we knew, let's do it completely different. And it is because now there's certain technologies. We have faster microprocessors. We have smaller computers, right? Like there's just things, and I'm not technical enough to know any of this, but there's just these things that are coming to that are available now that weren't before, that are making it easier to possibly commercialize. And not only that, we've also been working very closely with strategics over the years, right? And to your point, like that's where some of the early money comes from. They are looking 5 to 10 years out. What's going to keep them current, relevant, against their competitors? And with that, they need to find innovation, and that usually comes from startups because it's not going to come internally for the most part. And so, in working closely with them and hearing what their needs are, actually a lot of, we don't necessarily have tracks, we're kind of B2B agnostic, but we care about, we've cared about IoT, industrial IoT, collaboration, digital health, things where, we've seen a natural influx of startups while also having from the top down this interest from strategics and that kind of formula, creating these tracks as you call, as people would think of them, but just more so, it's kind of happened organically, and that's how we've been giving emphasis to certain things, deep tech or not, but I am seeing a lot more investors saying that they're looking at frontier tech, and I think there's a lot of investors that do have that technical expertise, and they're willing to put their money behind things that could give them huge returns if they, find the right people to do it. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Eloim Blyden, and I work for an organization called Biotech Partners. We've actually been around for 25 years and actually grown with the biotech industry in the Bay Area. But my question is, given that we're now talking about things like an educational ecosystem to help entrepreneurs, teach entrepreneurs what to do, how do we as educators who are starting, let's say at high school, we started 11th grade in high schools teaching students biotech, how do we adjust the curriculum or create ideas about education pathways into these, self-created careers, if you like, that are expected of the entrepreneur?
That's a good question. So what is, how do you get this sort of innovation mindset early stage? And, one of the things I've always struggled with, because I taught innovation and entrepreneurship, one of the things I struggled with is that I understand that for innovation to happen, there's a level of risk-taking that a person must take, and I don't know how to teach risk-taking. And then how do you teach that at an early stage? Without having the parents yell at you. Jump. Yeah.
So there's a school in Fresno called the Philip J. Patino High School. It's in a neighborhood that 40% of the people live are economically disadvantaged. They had a principal who started. It's a school of innovation and high school of entrepreneurship. I drove all the way down there to visit this school because it blew my mind. I mean, what they had done there was precisely what you're talking about. They created a template with these kids and taught them how to, basically it's problem solving, thinking out of the box. And the dramatic improvements that they saw in terms of college acceptance rates and things like that were just amazing. So it can be done. I think it really needs, you have to teach the teachers. I think that's one of the things that needs to happen. There are some schools around here in the Bay Area that have entrepreneurship curricula, but I think this school was just one of the most amazing places I ever visited. I think the principals left though, unfortunately, but they had demo days, they did, and the whole school kind of functioned in like an incubator. It was the most bizarre thing I ever saw. It was amazing.
Do you know if they actually churned into companies, or is it just?
No, it was. I don't think they really got to the stage. I don't think that was their objective, but it was to introduce them to entrepreneurial ways of thinking, and this actually extended into their academics. And they would have a room like this, and there'd be one class over there. So the English class and the history class maybe would be in the same room, and students would go back and forth. I mean, they had just this amazing model. Look it up. It's. I hope it's still on the web, but this was a few years ago. So I've seen models where people have done something very radically different, and it was impressive.
Yeah, that's interesting.
No, that's an interesting question, because I think about it certainly a lot because I have 2 little kids, and of course the curriculum that I grew up with is, I don't know how much it's changed, but seeing what they do, there's a lot of kind of this project-based learning and exploring and questioning in terms of, does that translate into, yes, like make mistakes and take risks? I don't know. They're still pretty young, so it's just like my older child is in 2nd grade. So, but I do notice that they're teaching concepts that I'm pretty sure I didn't even learn until high school. So they're learning about kind of like economics and like what do you need to do? What do you think that the customer the customer being the parents, would like, so that they will come to the bake sale. And so they did they sent a survey around and saying, would you come if we had donuts, coffee, chocolate chip cookies? How much would you pay for a donut? Like $1, $2, customer discovery. So I mean, to me that was fascinating. I don't know if that's unique to being in Silicon Valley, if they would teach that in other parts of the country, but I certainly didn't learn that growing up. It was very much, it was just not that. So maybe there is some impact, in terms of getting into that way of thinking about like the customer development, or if you want to sell something, how can you make it so that you'll sell as much as possible, or
Yeah, it's definitely, how do you teach risk, right? There's no risk, no reward in entrepreneurship, and you spend a lot of time with companies, especially in the early stages, just trying to get them over their own fear. Sending a cold email is probably like one of the scariest things they do at the beginning, because they analyze every aspect of it. Wait, what if I send this email? Just all of these. What happens? Like what? Instead of just like trust the process, just send the email, and then we'll figure out the what. We'll figure out how to solve for the what. But oftentimes they're their own worst enemies, and so getting them into that mentality to just be okay to try something. And that's why I don't actually like this word failure or to fail. I think that actually sets a really negative, kind of derogatory kind of thinking around what it is. It's learning, right? You're not failing. Even if the startup doesn't do well, you better have learned something. So it's more about just encouraging the try and iteration, right? Just go out there, try again. Just keep working at it. And then something's going to work eventually. But I think schools are set up to be like, this is the right way and this is the wrong way, and you get graded accordingly, right? So not that I have a better answer to that, because we're all A students in here, right? So, but I think there's probably something to that, and it's something maybe you do as you go through adulthood and maturity, and you learn that not everything is so black and white anymore. But yeah, maybe we can teach that earlier.
We have one last question, yes?
Hi. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather. My name is Erin Pangilinan, also Cal alumni. Is this thing on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I actually have a couple of questions. I'll try to keep it short. The first one is for Brian. Of the companies that you've had experience with, how many that applied for NIH, SBIR, TTR funding reached, I guess, phase 2 up to like the cap of $2 million? And if they did not do that, did they seek venture capital or other early stage seed funding? So that's my first question. The second and third are for Christine and Danielle. As a female founder, I'm in this space, which I guess qualifies as deep tech. I'm advancing Alzheimer's research with artificial intelligence and augmented reality. I'm very shy about it, only because I say it's a stealth company since my brother actually got screwed on patents with his first startup. So I've been very shy around pitching, yet I am like #1 ranked on Amazon for my O'Reilly book on augmented and virtual reality, shameless plug. And even with that, I'm finding with female founders, building out a team of co-founders, other women had been, kind of gun shy to apply for funding with the National Science Foundation, NIH, et cetera, and are holding off. They're kind of telling me, well, the only female founders that we see tend to be ones in college or over 50 because they have kids, and the threshold for applying for funding, whether it's government grants at the NIH or venture capital, is so high that they almost just opt out. And it's a trend that I see a lot, common with female founders across the board, not just deep tech. So my second question would be, how do you encourage other founders to overcome that fear? Mainly for me, it's, do I file my patents like Oculus told me to, and then work in partnership with them as opposed to, working for Facebook? And then the third question that I have outside of...
That's 4 now.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, 4. So SBIR, SCTR funding, to overcoming fear and patents.
Okay, so let's take the first one. So how many companies actually reached phase 2?
So I think probably about 30%, and some.
That's a lot.
It was maybe by choice.
Okay.
And I think the key thing in terms of overcoming, or the method, the way you approach this whole SBIR, STTR thing is you develop a relationship with the program people. You have to take the trouble to go to these SBIR events wherever they hold them, meet with them, talk to them, because they would, knowing them, you get a better understanding of what they're looking for. Applying for an SBIR or STTR is very different than applying for a research grant, which I think people in universities often make that mistake. So you need to completely reorient the way you craft this thing, and you need to form a relationship with these program managers. They actually want to talk to you, and they can talk to you until a call for proposals is issued. You need to go meet with them, talk to them, and suddenly you might even find a proposal that sounds exactly like your company. So this is the kind of stuff that happens. And I have no experience with the NIH, but the DOE and NSF. And you know, some of the like the DoD is, the Air Force has a fabulous SBIR program that is well worth looking into. Yeah. It's really quick and it's a little bit smaller, but there's a lot of opportunities.
And the second question is, with deep tech, do you worry more about IP than not in deep tech? You know, Christine?
Like, do the patents matter? Like, is that like factored into the decks that you evaluate very much, or does it not matter so much, provisional or
I'm curious what you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's for those types of companies. If the tech is really like tech, like. If that is your only differentiation, or you know, then you probably should get it patented, right? Like that is going to set you apart from everybody else, and of you know, delaying the time to market for everybody else. That's probably good to get that. For others, it's going to be more important to actually show validation. Like, will people buy this? Because if that's the case, then you can launch tomorrow, and it doesn't really matter about the patent, and investors will invest based off of that and less about whether you have a patent or not. You can always get the patent, but it really depends, I think, on where the differentiation is. Yeah.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank the panelists very much. Thank you for being here. All of you drove from somewhere else. Not from Berkeley, right?
I'm close.
You're very close. So
I'm close.
there's more refreshments and there's more dessert, and grab a T-shirt on your way out. And thank you all for coming.
I live in